Hey guys, it's Chris from Highland Guitars and you're watching another episode of From the Luthier's Workbench. In this episode, I'm going to expand upon what I talked about in the last episode, which was how I applied Solarez on this guitar body to mimic a hand-rubbed oil or Danish oil type finish. And if you haven't watched that video, you can click the link up here and go back and check that out. And what I'm going to be doing in this episode is applying that same finish to the neck. So let's jump in and get started. Now, before we jump into applying the finish on this neck, I did want to mention a couple of issues that I think are important to understand about using Solarez to mimic a hand-rubbed oil finish. And that is, in truth, Solarez is missing one key component that would help it to replicate the look of a hand-rubbed oil finish, and that is a golden amber tint. If you look at oils such as tung oil or boiled linseed oil, you'll notice they have kind of that golden amber tint to them. And when you apply it to the wood, it sort of lends that tint to the wood, and it kind of warms it up, and it also darkens the wood as well. Now, anytime you put a liquid on wood, it's going to make it dark, and that's true even if it's water, alcohol, naphtha, mineral spirits. When you apply those to the surface of the wood, they soak in, they make the wood look a lot darker, and then as they evaporate, the wood returns to its normal state. But when you use an oil, because that oil is a clear resin which will dry in the wood, it will darken the wood and the wood will stay that way. And so you'll get the darker appearance of the wood. Now, this neck, as an example, was finished with boiled linseed oil. And you can see the effect that it has on the color of the wood. This neck has been finished with just the Solarez. So you can see there's a major difference. So in terms of calling the Solarez a perfect or an exact replacement for the look and appearance of a hand-rubbed oil, that may not be accurate because as you can see, there's a significant difference. What it does look like, at least in my eye, is it replicates the appearance of applying nitrocellulose lacquer over raw wood. And that's, I think, closer to what you get. If I wanted to make this wood look exactly like it was finished with an oil, I think the best way to do it would be to put down a light, transparent golden amber dye stain to the wood first before applying the Solarez. I could also do the same thing by applying as maybe a single coat of like an amber shellac before applying the Solarez. But in this effort, I just decided to do Solarez directly over the raw wood. And I know that some folks, when it comes to creating the finish for their guitars, some are going to go after this look and some will want to go after this look. So I think it's definitely a really good way to quickly finish the guitar. It may not be a perfect representation of an oil-based finish, but it does come close, and I think it's definitely one to consider. Now, in future episodes of From the Luthier's Workbench, I plan to talk about a couple of other techniques that mimic a hand-rubbed oil finish, and those other techniques may come closer to creating the actual oil-rubbed finish. We'll see. So in the end, we'll be able to compare the Solarez approach with the other, I think there's two other techniques I'll be demonstrating, and we'll see which one looks most like oil, which one looks more like the nitrocellulose lacquer. And then you can decide after watching them which finish you would prefer on your guitar. So now we're going to get into applying the Solarez on this neck. Before I can apply the Solarez, I need to sand the neck, and I'll typically start with about a P220 grit. But that's because I make my necks with a CNC machine, and it can get the surface pretty smooth to begin with. However, if you're going to be making a neck using traditional methods, such as a draw knife, spoke shave, files, those sort of tools, you're probably going to have to start out with a coarser grit in order to get rid of those tool marks. But then once those tool marks have been removed, you can gradually progress through the grits. And I typically will stop at about 800 grit. And this gives me a surface that's smooth enough to apply the Solarez with less work afterwards to get the surface really smooth. To stay on the fretboard, the first thing I need to do is to make sure that it is as level as I can get it. And I'll check it with a straight edge, and if necessary, I'll adjust the truss rod to make it straight. Now, once I have the fretboard as level as I can get it, I want to check and see if there are any high and low spots anywhere along its length, and then make a mental note of those. Then what I'll do is I'll sand the fretboard using a 30-inch long radius sanding block that has a radius that matches the fretboard. I like to use 220 grit sandpaper when truing up the radius of the fretboard. And the technique I use is to periodically flip around the neck. And that way, if there's any errors in my sanding stroke, they're canceled out. After fine-tuning the radius of the fretboard, I'll sand out the scratches left by the 220 grit, starting out with about a 320 grit, and then I'll jump to 400, 600, and then I'll finish with about an 800 grit sandpaper. Now once I finish sanding, I like to vacuum and blow off the dust. And because maple is so light in color, it can be really hard to see flaws and sanding scratches in the surface. So I'll just wipe down the surface with a little bit of denatured alcohol in order to bring out any possible scratches or flaws in the surface, because it's a lot easier to fix it now than it is later on after the Solarez has been applied. I'm going to be applying the Solarez, I can't believe it's not Lacquer, brush on formula. And to do it, I'm going to be using a small clean cloth, and I'll apply the Solarez in much the same manner that I would apply an oil finish such as tung oil or boiled linseed oil. I'm just going to wipe on a thin coating of the lacquer and let it soak in to the wood. Now you may find it easier to apply Solarez in steps. For example, you could do the fretboard and the headstock first and then cure those, then follow up by doing the back contour and the back of the headstock second. It just might make it a little bit easier to handle the neck as you're applying and curing the product. And once it's had a chance to soak in, I'll take a clean paper towel and wipe the surface to make sure that the Solarez is evenly distributed. Then I'll take the neck out into bright, unobstructed sunlight. And in the summertime, without any clouds in the sky, it'll take a couple of minutes for that Solarez to fully cure. If it's cloudy, it may take a little bit longer. After curing the Solarez that was applied to the fretboard and the face of the headstock, I'll apply it to the back contour of the neck shaft as well as the back and sides of the headstock, and then I can take those out and cure them using the same approach. Since global warming has made it too hot and dangerous to stand for any length of time in direct sunlight, I put together a simple curing station, and this allows me to cure my Solarez while minimizing my own skin's exposure to the dangerous sunlight. And this way, I don't have to worry about getting a sunburn or skin cancer. And then I can just flip the piece around every couple of minutes to make sure that all sides are evenly exposed to the sun. After the Solarez has been cured, I can then sand the surface with a P800 grit sandpaper to get rid of any rough spots or rag marks that may have been left in the application process. Then I'll be ready to apply the second coat. The second coat of Solarez is applied exactly the same way as the first coat was applied. I'm just going to do the fretboard and the face of the headstock first, cure those, and then I'll do the neck shaft and the back and sides of the headstock second. And curing the second coat is exactly the same as how I cured the first coat. Just set it out in the sun for a couple of minutes and it will be cured bone dry. Once it's all cured, I will lightly sand the entire surface with P800 grit, just like I did after the first coat. And this is, of course, to remove any residual rough spots or rag marks. Now, at this point, the neck is pretty much finished. However, I like to apply a little bit of paste carnauba wax to the surface, and this helps to add an extra layer of protection. And it's something that you can apply periodically to keep the neck looking really nice. And this is how the neck turned out after applying 2 coats of the Solarez I Can't Believe It's Not Lacquer, followed by 2 coats of carnauba wax. And there you have it. It's a pretty simple process. And that concludes my 2-part series on how I used Solarez I Can't Believe It's Not Lacquer to approximate a hand-rubbed oil finish. It's faster to apply, cures much, much quicker, and provides even better protection against moisture and scratches and dings and things like that. So in future episodes, what I would like to do is share a couple of other techniques that I have developed that are intended to mimic that hand-rubbed oil finish. And some of these techniques might be more accurate as far as producing that hand-rubbed oil look. And they are going to involve, one technique will involve the use of an epoxy. The other is a totally water-based approach. And then one of them uses super glue. So stick around for those in the future. And I'm not exactly sure when I'll be posting those episodes. It just depends on how quickly I get future builds completed. And if you want to be informed of every time one of my new episodes is posted, of course, hit the subscribe button, click that little bell icon so that you'll get an email notification every time I post a new video. And don't worry, I'm not going to be spamming you. I only do 1 video a week, so that's all the notification you'll be getting. And if this episode was beneficial, please, of course, hit the like button, give me a thumbs up and all that stuff. And, leave your comments. Let me know what you think. Maybe some of you have some other ideas for techniques that would mimic this sort of hand-rubbed oil finish. I don't know. So until the next episode, though, take care. We'll see you soon.